Öncelikle hepiniz hoş geldiniz.
Welcome all. While listening to that presentation, actually, if you have a dream that you cannot forget, because I'm going to talk about technique, so phenomenological dream self-model, so that maybe I can make it more comprehensible. Therefore, I'm going to describe some concepts and then I'm going to elaborate on the approaches. So please try to remember your dream. Phenomenology is the first concept that we face in the theory. So it needs a self-disclosing attitude. Keeping that in mind, we make a comma for epoche methods. It is more of a restricted concept, not only dreaming, but all of the sensory system, all of the emotions and thoughts are included. It has a very wide spectrum. Therefore, PDSM can be considered as a self-model. Now I'm going to talk about the stages. We have 4 stages. So let's describe that so that we can make a framework. And then I will be elaborating all stages and exemplifying from publications. So maybe you may want to listen to yourself. First stage, dreaming describes the living of the self without allowing any interpretation, only containing senses and behaviors and tendencies. Second stage describes dreamlike wakefulness. Third one is the description of the first one regarding dreaming and wakefulness, and fourth stage is the research of the description and the dreaming. So we want description of the phenomenological approach. However, before starting elaboration on the stages, I want to talk about preparatory phase. Before starting to interpret the dream, we need a compromise between the consultant and the patient. We have a very wide spectrum. On one hand, we have a perspective which thinks dreams are meaningless, but on the other hand, we have a perspective which emphasizes about the symbols in the dreams. What we emphasize is how we work on dreams so that we can explain the process. You just don't see the dream, you explain it. It has more of an existential basis. You live the dream, not only see it. In the session, you talk with the patient. You say that you have a patient. Is there a difference between the real life Ali and Ali in the dream? and the patient may answer that there is no difference between the one I dream and the one I live. Also, there are some dreams where the patient see himself as a Greek goddess. I mean, he feels like himself, but in a different form. He is still himself, so we need to think about a common language if you are your actual self. First stage, the purpose is to describe everything phenomenologically by disclosing everything according to dream. So we can also interpret and work on our dreams by means of PDSM if you want to understand yourself. I tried on myself too for years. So it raises lots of awareness towards yourself. We don't add anything that is not in the dream. So we suspend the state of minds in wakefulness. According to PDSM, I repeat it a lot, but the pattern of dreaming lacks, and the dream is associated with the life. The second stage, here the purpose is a dreamlike state about the things you feel in the wakefulness state. You describe by questioning. In the first stage, you separate the dream act by act, and then the tendencies, senses, and behaviors of the self are analyzed, and in the second stage, we associate the dream with the real life, the wakefulness. But in the third stage, we write down what would you do if your dream happens in real life. So the second one is the possible scenarios that you can live in the real life, but you see it in your dream. Let's make an example. You get on the plane in your dream, but in the wakefulness, you say that you are afraid of getting on the plane. So we have a different perspective when you are awake and you see dream. In your dream, you may play with a cat, but when you are awake, there might be complaints that you like a cat again. In the third stage, the self should be compared with all the emotions, thoughts, tendencies, and behaviors, along with description data between the first two stages. In terms of therapeutic meaning, there might be an obvious perspective difference in the self state. So we do lots of studies about it. In both perspectives, if there is no difference, it doesn't mean that it is negative. I mean, every stage has a value within the case. stage, the fourth one, the purpose is to interpret the dream without getting away from phenomenological structure if needed. And in this stage, we ask that, we have the description of the dream, and we have the description of the wakefulness state and the possible scenarios. And in the third stage, we check for the parallel states or differences, and then we assess according to therapeutic aspect. And if it is a metaphoric dream, what could that represent in your own life? We work with consultants. If the therapists need to interpret or comment, then we need to consider the interpretation that came from the consultant. So it is limiting. This is a case, female patient at the age of 34. She was about to divorce from his husband, and I'm going to talk about her dream because she didn't know what to feel about his husband. We conducted a study on her, and her dreams were about her problems in her relationship. We were walking on the streets with my husband. All of a sudden, I saw my husband with another woman that he had an affair, and I showed the woman to my husband, and my husband told me that he already knew, and then we kept walking. That was the dream of our patient. So how did we work? We separate the acts at the first stage. First act is the moment where the patient walked with her husband, and all the thoughts and senses, emotions that she felt. She said she was quite happy and didn't feel anger. On the second stage, she said she felt so bad that she felt like she was going to suffocate. At the third stage, it was all the details that she could remember. She said she was quite furious while she was expressing herself because his husband said he already knew, which means he didn't care. So her husband's reaction, her husband tried to soothe her, and then they kept walking. On the second stage, we asked what would happen if you faced that situation in real life. She told us that she had similar moments in real life too. She told her about her arguments with her husband. And when this happened, she told that she was continuously thinking of divorcing. While walking on the street, what would happen if you if your dream came true? She told that she would never act like in her dream. She said she would have an anger burst, and then she would walk away from there. So we have a description of emotional state and thought of the patient. We write down the notes in the third stage. It is the difference between wakefulness and dreaming about the self. So, in an awake state, the patient is furious, insecure, and uncertain, and in despair. But in the dream, the patient felt she was loved by her husband, and she was more moderate and compromising. So we analyzed all of that and assessed the situation. Therefore, PDSM provided us with a new awareness about the situation. So the patient thought that it would be wiser to suspend her decision of divorcing. So, along with PDSM, it will get more and more clear the more you work on it. In the center of PDSM, we have a self, just like in our real life. And if the patient wants to listen to herself or himself, it is a quite nice method. I mean, maybe you can work on yourself, just like this case. I would like to listen to your stories too. Thank you so much for your attention.